Hey guys, I wanted to come on here and talk a little bit about our first paper prompt. Well, our first analytic essay prompt, I should say, which is already up and available to you on Canvas. So everything, well, a lot of what I'm going to go through, you also have in writing on the prompt. I'm also going to be uploading other materials as we go along, suggested ways to approach and structure this paper. I'll either make a video or some materials talking about the grading criteria, how the papers are graded in this class. So you will have lots of guidance through this process. You're also going to receive written feedback from me on the rough draft that you submit. So in addition to class activities and peer review and things like that, you'll also have some of my feedback before it comes time to submit a final version of this paper. It's also worth noting that we write 4 analytic essays in this class, and all 4 of them have the same grading criteria, the same structure, the same expectations. So the text that you're writing about will change as we read more text in this class, and the actual prompt question that I pose to you will change. But the actual, again, structure and expectations will stay the same throughout the course. So that's kind of nice because it allows you to go through a sort of trial and error process. You could stumble a little bit early in the semester and still wind up doing just fine as long as you get the hang of it eventually. So to go through a few kind of basic submission details, the rough draft of this is going to be due Tuesday, September 22nd. It should be at least 1,300 words and or 4 full pages long. So please don't skimp on those requirements. Word count always means that much content, right? Not including like the title or the heading or the page numbers or the works cited page. And page minimums are a minimum, right? So if it says at least 4 full pages, that means the shortest possible paper I'll accept is to the last line of the 4th page. Again, please don't skimp. If anything is ever significantly under a length minimum, I would just bounce it right back to you and say, I can't accept this. This is incomplete. Please finish it and resubmit for a late grade. There are late penalties in this class for all assignments. So if a rough draft is submitted late, the paper is docked half a letter grade. If the final draft is submitted late, the paper is docked a full letter grade. So long story short, don't let it happen, right? These papers are tricky enough. There's enough of a learning curve as it is. You don't want to wind up losing credit for things like it being too short or you submitting it late or whatever. Try to be on top of that. And final draft, I don't know if I said this already, is due the following week, Tuesday, September 29th. And that one's a little bit longer, at least 5 full pages and or 1,700 words. Everything we write in this class should be in MLA format. So that specifies the font size, the margins, the heading, the title, the works cited page. You've already gotten a little bit of feedback on your textual analysis exercise. So if your formatting was way off or slightly off, you should hopefully have that fixed in this next paper and start getting the hang of things. You're going to be using our first 2 texts if that's not obvious yet. So Martha Stout's When I Woke Up Tuesday Morning, It Was Friday, and Sherry Turkle's Selections from Alone Together, Why We Expect More from Technology and Less from Each Other. You're going to use these 2 texts and these 2 texts only. So largely our goal in this class is to see what you can do by close reading language and ideas just from 2 given texts or 3 given texts. So you should not be pursuing outside sources or evidence. I discourage it. If you absolutely must, again, I think you should try to avoid it if you can, but if you absolutely must bring in a quick definition of something or a quick whatever bit of evidence to support something, just make sure it's cited. Everything is run through Turnitin. I also have a pretty good eye. So don't try to, or don't wind up accidentally getting yourself in a situation where you're accused of plagiarizing, okay? Work with the source text that you're given. Try to just stick to that, work with the language and ideas that they've given you. And always give credit, even if it's coming from Stout and Turkle. You should still be giving credit that that's where it's coming from. Okay. So I think that's it for like the formatting type stuff. I'm sure questions will come up. As they do, please reach out and we'll address them. So anytime you see one of the prompts in this class, it's going to be formatted in a similar way. So I'll always have a text box with sort of a little spiel where I'm pulling language and concepts from these texts that I see as related, and then I'll pose the prompt question to you in bold. This is a synthesis paper, which means you are connecting the ideas from these two texts in some way, or the terms, the language from these two texts in some way. It's not just a compare contrast. It's not just like, here's what Stout and Turkle have in common. It's a little bit more complex than that, which is partially why I'll make a prompt to like point you in a particular direction. But you'll see throughout the semester that you can interpret these prompts loosely. They're pretty open-ended, and I hope you'll take the freedom to kind of use this as a starting point, use this as a way to prompt your thinking. But then if you stumble into a really interesting idea, or you come up with some kind of argument that you think is really compelling, I hope that you'll pursue that. The goal of writing these prompts is not for me to get 22 identical papers. Again, it's just a springboard. It's a way to prompt your thinking, to point you in a direction, to get you in thinking in a way that's more complexly synthetic, right? Rather than just getting stuck in that compare-contrast model. Okay, so I'm not going to read the prompt word for word, but I'll kind of talk you through what I was thinking as I wrote it. So Stout and Turkle both talk about kids, children in their pieces. Turkle in a more obvious way, right? Her whole study pretty much is looking at kids playing with these robotic toys. And Stout, it's a little bit subtler, but it was actually one of the passages for the textual analysis exercise. She talks about how kids have a really loose sense of reality and how they play pretend and they dissociate from themselves. And they start doing this when there's childhood trauma, but they even do it kind of regularly. But when they do it in terms of trauma, this was the part on the TAE, she says it's functional for them while they're young, but it's when they continue doing it into adulthood that it becomes dysfunctional. So I was intrigued by that as I was reading Turkle, looking at kids, and she also noticed how they were open to playing pretend, right? To interacting with these toys as if they were alive and kind of playing with these theories, sort of. She keeps calling them philosophers, right? Theories of like what makes something alive and how do you engage with these robotic toys and all of this. So as I was reading that, I was thinking about Stout's categories of functional and dysfunctional. And I was wondering if we could apply them to the kids in Turkle, right? So these kids in Turkle, as they're interacting with these robotic toys, is that functional for them? Will it become dysfunctional if they keep doing it as adults? Or, I mean, conversely, is it dysfunctional for kids, but functional if you continue this into adulthood? Is it functional for both? Dysfunctional for both? Would you categorize it or characterize it in a way totally different from this? So this was my thought. The way I posed the question in the end is, in what ways might we understand the theories of the children in Turkle as being functional for them as children and dysfunctional later as they grow into adults? So really it's the idea of using Stout's categories of functional and dysfunctional to characterize the behaviors of the kids in Turkle. Again, this is like kind of complex, but I'm writing the prompt in this way so that, as I said before, it'll hopefully push you past compare contrast. This is not just what do Stout and Turkle have in common and what do they have different from one another. This is how can we use Stout's terminology and concepts to explain examples in Turkle, which is now a true synthesis of ideas, right? It allows us to see Turkle in a way that maybe we wouldn't see her without using Stout. So you always want to keep that in mind when you're writing papers in this class. The idea is to show us something that we might have not otherwise seen without you. Papers that just kind of repeat something that's already obvious from the source text are going to get called summary, right? Many of you may have even gotten that comment already on your TAE draft. You really, really want to push past, and this should sound familiar from the close reading video as well. You really want to push past just showing me that you know what Stout and Turkle talked about, what they wrote about. You want to go on and do something new with these texts, right? So by synthesizing ideas from these two texts, what new thing can you show your reader? Can you teach your reader? How can you extend and open up this conversation? Do something new with it. I think I mentioned already, or if I haven't, I want to save the grading criteria for a separate video or for separate materials because I don't want this to get too long. But that originality, that pushing out of summary and into some new territory is really, really significant in writing not only successful papers in this class, but even passing papers in this class. You're going to have to figure out what am I learning as I'm writing this, and what can I teach my reader that they might not see without me. Okay, so you'll always have kind of the basic submission requirements, that text box with the little spiel, and then the prompt question, and then there'll be a section called questions to get you started. And I have a note here, and I'll always put this note on the prompts, that this is not meant to be like a checklist of questions that you run down in your paper. So like question 1, paragraph 1, question 2, paragraph 2. It's not at all meant to work that way or be that restrictive or prescriptive. They really are just to get you started. So the same way I said, this prompt question is meant to prompt your thinking, and then you kind of follow that path of inquiry as you will. The questions to get you started are meant to work in a similar way, to facilitate brainstorming, to help activate your memory, right? Oh, this reminds me of this part of Turkle. This reminds me of this part of Stout. It will hopefully point you in a direction when it comes time to gathering some evidence, getting some close reading started. And then when it comes time, again, to write the paper, then you're structuring it around whatever argument, thesis it is that you're pursuing, okay? So don't feel married to these questions. Don't feel married to this prompt. These are here to get you started. A quick note about the TAE, the textual analysis exercise. I probably should have started with this. I tried to write the first week sample, the textual analysis exercise, and this first prompt so that they all sort of flowed into one another. So the first week writing sample, if you remember, talked about how these dissociative habits like protect us, but also hurt us, right? And then the textual analysis exercise, you were looking at how these things were good for kids, but get dysfunctional for adults, how there's kind of these two sides to these coping mechanisms. So keep that in mind as you're bringing Turkle into this conversation, especially if you are proud of some of the work you did in that sample or in the TAE, or if you had some interesting idea while you were working on either of those pieces. In what ways are the children in Turkle engaging in something that's at once healthy, functional, but also potentially unhealthy and dysfunctional, right? How do we draw those lines? How do we categorize? Is it going to change from when they're young to when they get older? Could we even see those different categories within different behaviors and beliefs by just children or by just adults? The TAE was not supposed to be like a random activity that you're going to flush out of your brain. It was a way of practicing the kind of analysis that you're going to have to do in this very paper, right? You could think of your TAE paragraphs as like potential body paragraphs in a larger essay. So you can reuse content from your TAE potentially, especially if you get good feedback on it. Why not? If it relates to this argument, you will of course have to work Turkle into the discussion. You'll have to make sure it fits in with the thesis of this new larger paper. But feel free to reuse bits of evidence, to reuse bits of analysis, ideas. You're not plagiarizing from yourself, right? They are your own ideas. So again, hold on to whatever realizations or practice or strategies you picked up on in our early activities in the writing sample and in the TAE, and bring all of that with you to this analytic essay, okay? All right, so I've probably been talking for long enough at this point. Stay tuned for more resources about how you might approach and structure this paper, how I'm going to be grading papers throughout the rest of the semester. Please reach out, as always, if there's any questions along the way, if you want me to take a look at anything you're working on or bounce some ideas off of me. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing what you guys come up with. All right, see ya.